Monks has an unconstrained and open-minded investment process. It very much benefits from the breadth of Baillie Gifford's stock picking capabilities, where we have over 140 investors looking for the very best growth ideas anywhere in the world. Monks is run by one of Baillie Gifford's most experienced teams, the Global Alpha team, which is a dedicated team of 6 analysts, 2 of which are Spencer Adair and Malcolm McCall, who are the decision makers for the trust. And we have a scout network, which, as I mentioned, is plugged into those regional equity teams right across Baillie Gifford. We seek to back enthusiasm and think ambitiously about the possibilities of company growth, and therefore are very much reward-seeking in our outlook. I think that the trust approach is very much differentiated on the basis of its willingness to embrace both change and the diversity of growth, different ways that businesses can grow. So specifically, we have 3 growth profiles. One is a rapid growth businesses, and these are companies that are highly innovative, often earlier stage, but growing very quickly and looking to generate earning growth further out into the future. We have stalwart growth businesses, which tend to be more established companies with considerable user bases over which those companies are able to apply a considerable degree of pricing power. And then finally, we have cyclical growth businesses, which are companies that are exposed to capital cycles and industry cycles, where the earnings growth may be more uneven over time. Well, typical holding period for Monks is over 5 years, which is consistent with our long-term investment horizon. In terms of how we generate ideas, we're bottom-up stock pickers. So we conduct our own proprietary research and seek to generate our own insight and are not reliant on others. As part of the process, kicking the tires, getting out and meeting companies is central to what we do. That's clearly been more challenging during the pandemic, but we're very much getting back to that this year. We have a framework of a 6 weekly portfolio review group meetings, and these are really where the best ideas are shared, both within the team and from the Scout network for Monks. And these are discussed and debated and taken forward in a series of individual stock discussions prior to potential inclusion within the portfolio. Now, really, the important point here is the benefit that we get from a majority of investors being in one place. So we're able to build a culture of discussion and debate. And we think that's fundamentally a really important advantage in distilling the very best ideas for inclusion within the Monks Investment Trust. So, for example, core ideas that have come from within the team include companies like Royalty Pharma, which funds late-stage clinical trials, and Analog Devices, which is a semiconductor manufacturer. Ideas that have come out with the team that have been discussed and brought into the team, into the portfolio, include the likes of Tesla in electric vehicles, Moderna in vaccines, and C Limited, which is an e-commerce payments and gaming business in Southeast Asia. Well, Monks has performed strongly over long periods of generally 5 years or more, and particularly since the Global Alpha team took over the management of the trust back in 2015. Recent performance has been more challenging. There's been somewhat of a perfect storm, given the effects of the pandemic and a war in Europe between Russia and Ukraine, and the impact that has had both on inflation and the projections for interest rates globally. All of that has meant that the tolerance to uncertainty has fallen in the market, and time horizons have collapsed, and people have become much more interested in certainty, and growth businesses have therefore been out of favour. However, our view is that volatility is very much part of long-term investing, and we need to stick to backing companies that we believe in over long periods, even during challenging periods that we're experiencing at the moment. Portfolio turnover has remained low, which is a reflection in our ongoing conviction in the holdings within the portfolio, and therefore we remain optimistic about the outlook for growth from here. Well, our outlook is intrinsically positive as optimistic growth investors, where others are pessimistic. We recognise it's been a challenging period in performance terms, but really believe that now is the time to be an active bottom-up stock picker and to take advantage of the volatility we've seen in markets. So we continue to place much more weight on the ability of companies to be innovative and grow their way through difficult periods. So we think that this is much more important than, for example, rising inflation or rising rates. So just I mentioned Moderna earlier. We think it's much more that the prospects of Moderna are much more dependent on their ability to apply their drug and vaccine to a broader range of diseases than whether inflation or interest rates rise in the near to medium term. We're also focused on structural growth opportunities, which is fundamentally important as long-term investors. And we think there are several out there that are hugely interesting. For example, the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energies is of systemic importance to the global economy and society generally. Monks already has investments across the value chain here, from miners to electric vehicle manufacturers, and recently invested in a company called Nexans, which is a French business that makes the cabling which will connect offshore wind farms with electricity grids on mainland. An example of an opportunity in an area we think is going to be fundamentally important over the very long term. Alternatively, we see great excitement and opportunity in addressing inefficiencies in the healthcare system. Traditionally, biotech pharmaceutical companies have faced challenges around inefficiencies and scaling effectively. But we're seeing really innovative biotech companies, and indeed not just biotech companies, but software businesses, which are helping these businesses address challenges in the sector. So, for example, we've taken a recent holding in a company called Certara, which builds biosimulation software, which effectively mimics the impact of drugs on vital organs, which is likely to speed up the trial process and make these companies much more efficient and move drugs to approval stages much more quickly. So there's huge excitement and opportunity around some of these structural growth opportunities, which is where we focus as long-term investors much more than we do on the near-term challenges and the worries the broader market has. So overall, Monks fundamentally has an optimistic outlook, and we focus on the exciting structural growth opportunities that are available to us, and think that the way that we structure the portfolio in addressing a broad diversity of growth that I touched on earlier means that we're well placed to capture some of that growth.